So paraphrasing in-text citations are when we're putting things in our own words. When we're writing a research paper, we need to show where we got our information from. You can't just write about stuff that's, oh, I just know this. No, you got that information from somewhere. And in a research paper, we don't want to go with anecdotal firsthand experiences or I have a friend who, that kind of thing. We're going off of what the research says. So if you're writing a research paper and you have a paragraph where you're getting information from somewhere else and you don't have an in-text citation, a lack of an in-text citation is stating that you personally did the research to verify the accuracy of everything that's in that paragraph. When we do that, it's a liability, right? That's not true. That's not accurate. We need to be documenting our sources. And even if you put something in your own words, you still have to have an in-text citation, because if you don't have an in-text citation showing where you got the information from, that is a form of plagiarism as well. So probably just about every paragraph in your research paper is going to have an in-text citation. And this is the format that we use for paraphrasing in-text citations. So if I'm putting something in my own words, right, this is the format I use to document where I got my information from. If the source that you are using has just one author, we put the author's last name and the year that that article or the source you were using was published. So in this instance, Gladding 2020. Gladding was the author. His article was published in 2020. We would put that in the in-text citation. If your article has two or more authors, you would give both of the authors' last names and you keep them listed in the order that they appear. So like MLA may tell you to alphabetize it, you list it in APA style, you list it in the order that it appears in the article. So if we used an article and the last names of the authors were James and Down, and that's the order that they were listed in, James came first and Down came second, we leave it that way. Because in APA style, what that means is James did more work on that article than Down did. And if we alphabetized it like MLA does, and we put Down and then James, we're taking away all of James's credit. That's kind of rude if we're being honest, right? So we put both authors' last names, James and Down, and then the year. And then finally, if you have an article or a source that you're using that has three or more authors, we use this thing called et al. So we put the first author's name, again, whoever is listed first, that's who we use. So in this source, it was Wit. And then let's say there was 5 or 6 authors. We don't have to list all 4 or 5 other authors' names. We just do this thing et al, E-T-A-L period, and then we put the year, 2025. So if you have one author, you just list that one author's name. If you have 2 authors, you list both of the authors' names with the little ampersand in between. And then if you have 3 or more authors for that source, you just list the first author's last name, et al, and then the year. So let's take a look at some examples of how these in-text citations would look. So let's say we're using information from a source that only has one author. And what we have written here is what the student wrote themselves in their own words. It's paraphrased. We have the statement, the sentence, right? And then we put the citation at the end, Gladding 2020. One author, so just that person's last name, and then the year that it was published, 2020. We have 2 authors. We're going to list both of the authors' last names and the year. So we see in this instance, the second bulleted point here, this is what the student wrote. That's the last names and the year. And again, remember with 3 or more authors, we're just going to list that first author's last name, et al, period after the L and all, and then 2025. right? Et al. Is a fancy way of saying and everyone else. So we don't have to list all 6 of the author's names, just the first author's last name and then the year.